everybody, this is a video from Miss Duckworth's classroom. This is part 1 of how to answer an extract question, and the focus is on Arthur Miller's The Crucible. Okay, so let's just start off with the assessment objectives. So it's very important for you to have an idea of what the assessment objectives are for the exam that you are covering, just so that you've got a better idea of how to be successful. So if we have a look, we have AO1, AO2, AO3 and AO4. So AO1 is evidence that you've got a good understanding of the extract. So remember, this is for the extract question. So who is involved, what's happening, why is this particular section significant to the story of the play? What can you say about the relationships? What do you notice? What stands out? And then you've got the reference to the text, which is the quotation. So your ability to select and use relevant quotations. AO2 refers to your ability to pick out and comment on the deeper meanings and ideas and attitudes, inference and interpretation. So you want to be able to make your own inferences based upon the language used, the devices used, and you want to interpret meaning. Think about the writer's intention. So what is Miller's message here? What's his purpose? What is he trying to show you? What does he want you to understand? What does he want you to think? And then relevant contextual information. Try not to worry too much about the contextual information. If you think it's not relevant, then you don't need to use it. So you don't just want to bolt it on to the end of a paragraph just because you think you should say something about the context. If it's relevant, if it enhances your answer, if it helps you to develop your interpretation, then by all means add it in. AO3 is your ability to comment on the methods that are used. So how are events, characters, relationships, action presented to you? This is where you're expected to comment on language, structure and form and how they shape meaning. You should know why something is presented in the way that it is and what the effect is on the audience. AO4 is all about your essay writing skills. It's your ability to present your ideas in a coherent and relevant way and to be able to develop a personal response in relation to the question. So again, that comes back to you being able to understand the question, pick out the keywords in the question, and then be able to select relevant parts of the extract in response to the question. So how you're formulating your points and where your essay is really going. So let's just have a think about the steps that you should go through. So you have your extract in front of you, you have the question, what should you do? So the first thing that you should do is read the question, deconstruct it. That means pull it apart, pick out the keywords, think about what those words mean. So you want to highlight those keywords, think about what your focus is. So you need to know that before you start looking at the extract. So it's sometimes a good idea to just write these on the top of the extract or on a piece of scrap paper next to you. It will just help to keep you focused. So if we do that now at the bottom, you can see the question here at the bottom. So how does Miller vividly portray the relationship between John Proctor and Abigail in this section of the play? So the focus here is the relationship between them. So that's your key word, relationship. So then when you read through the extract, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for how is this relationship presented to me? What am I shown about this relationship? How do I understand this relationship? You could even jot those questions down as well to help you, because that will kind of keep you focused as you're going through. So this is the extract that we are going to be using today. So we have the extract here, and then we have where it's from. It's from Act 1. We can see that at the bottom. So this is the first time that we see Abigail and John Proctor together. So this is where John enters the scene and the other girls leave. Betty is there, but she's currently she's asleep, she's unconscious. So this is the first time we get to see the relationship dynamic between them, and that already should give you an idea of why it's significant. So if you just want to have a read of the extract, you can pause the video here. If you're familiar with it, then perhaps you don't need to. So then let's have a look at the second step. So we now know that relationships is our focus. We want to know how their relationship is presented to us, what we learn about it. So then we read the extract. Now, as you're reading it, just be jotting down some notes, and these notes really will help you later on. So where is it from? So think about whereabouts in the play. As I've said, so this is Act 1, you're told that. So that tells you something in terms of what Miller is trying to set up for you initially. In Act 1, he's presenting a lot of ideas that he will continue throughout the rest of the play. What's happening? Who is involved? Where is it? Why is it significant? Why is it important? Think about why it's been chosen. Think about the mood that's expressed, what the themes are that you can see. what Miller's trying to show you and why. The question has given you a clue. So Miller is trying to show you something about their relationship. You just have to figure out what it is. And then you can think about, well, what are the big ideas that I see in this extract? It's a good idea for you to just brainstorm some key ideas or keywords that kind of really represent what you feel you are being shown here, and then you may come back to them later on. They could be used for your point sentences when you start to plan out your answer. So this is step 3. So like I said to you, step 3 is just you reading but making notes. So for the purpose of this video, I have read through the extract and these are my notes. So think about the significance of the extract. So I've thought about where it is. So Act 1, before we've truly seen the extent of Abigail's power. Now that's important because she's incredibly powerful throughout the rest of the play. However, snippets of this power are introduced here with John. We get a close look at the relationship between the two characters. It's the only scene where we see them completely alone. We also get to see Abigail's feelings and her vulnerability. John is her weakness and her feelings for him are her weakness. And that's something quite rare in Abigail's character. We also begin to get a hint of Abigail's jealousy. Obviously this is developed immediately after this extract, but that's not what we've been given. So we do just get a snippet of Abigail's jealousy here. We also get a sense of John's guilt. We see what his sin is, but we also see how he starts to regret that. Now, notice how I'm showing you that we start with this, it moves on to this. So you should also be thinking about how ideas progress throughout the extract. It doesn't begin with him showing his regret, but it definitely ends that way. And then we've got John's attitude changes. So I do just want to make a note of that for myself because I may use that later on. We get this sense of desire. That's very, very important. You get that through both of them actually. Abigail does not suppress her desires. This makes her very different to everybody else, and that links me back down to some of the points here I've made about what I already know about the play, which I'll get to in a second. Their affair actually goes against the strict Puritan social restrictions, so this is me bringing in the context, so it's relevant here. So you'll notice that I'm only bringing in context that's relevant. So their affair goes against what their society teaches, so it's actually it's quite a big transgression what they're doing here. John refuses to continue the affair, but there is evidence that she captivates him. And then there is a tension between them. Now it starts off as more of a sexual tension. There's desire there that creates tension. And then the tension shifts towards the end of the extract, where we have John's denial and John being more forceful in trying to end the relationship. And she doesn't really want to accept that. So the tension interestingly changes as we move through the extract. Now this bit is very important because this will actually help you with your interpretation of what you do see in the extract. So what we already know about the play, the Puritan society, very, very strict, very hierarchical. Abigail's a woman, so there are issues of gender within the play, which means that she is at the bottom of the hierarchy. She is less powerful than the men around her. But what's interesting is that we do see a sense of her power here, even when she's relating to a man. She's also a servant, so she occupies a much more inferior position. This society is very, very repressed, and this idea is quite poignant because it links back to this idea of desire being expressed here. The church dominates the society. Members of the society must adhere to the strict Puritan doctrine, which again is interesting because they're not. And this particularly, I think, would possibly be something that you would use later on. Individuality and individual desires are discouraged, yet they still show them in this extract, and they clearly have acted on them in the past. So what I already know about the characters and their relationship: John is married. His affair with Abigail goes against his marriage vows as well as the strict Puritan rules, which kind of helps us to understand the regret that he feels and the fact that this is such a huge sin for him to have committed. And then as I was reading through, from start to finish, whenever an idea popped into my head, so remember we're thinking about what big ideas are expressed by Miller here. As I was reading through, anything that popped into my head I just made a note of. So I see desire, I see adultery, I see sin, I see this idea of secrecy, I see John's regret become more evident, I see the tension between them, I see power struggle, and I see Abigail's growing confidence and power. So these are just all the things that I felt I could see as I read through. And all of these notes will be incredibly useful, so it is worthwhile taking 5 minutes just to make them as you read through your extract. So you think about what you see, you think about what is presented, and you think about what Miller is showing you, and that will help you in terms of structuring the notes that you're going to make. And this also ties in quite nicely with your AOs. So AO1 is having a good understanding of the extract. All of this demonstrates that you do. Obviously you don't hand this in to be marked, but this will feed into your essay when you eventually write it up. And also the deeper meaning. So the big ideas that are being expressed here. So we have so many key words here that we can use later to help us when we're creating our points which reflect the big ideas. So then we've gone through steps 1, 2 and 3, and now we're at the point where we can go back through the extract and we can just highlight anything that's relevant. Now you may wish to combine step 4 with step 2, so as you're reading the extract you may also want to highlight anything that you feel is interesting or that stands out, or you may want to do that on your second reading. This is completely up to you. So once you've gone through and you've made all of these notes, so these notes will actually help you when you're highlighting what you think you could potentially use as your AO1 in terms of your evidence. So just go through and highlight anything relevant to the question and your initial ideas. And as you're going, try and annotate. So think about what can you say about each of the examples, what does it show? Again, use these words. There's a lot of interesting words and phrases within here. So if you highlight something, you may say, okay, well this shows desire, or this shows regret. So these words are already going to come in very useful. So see if there are any patterns that you can comment on. So sometimes there are patterns in terms of language used or phrases or characters maybe saying, copying the words of another character. So sometimes you can pick up on the patterns. Think if you can link any quotes together. This will help you again in terms of a pattern that's created throughout the extract. Try and analyse these in as much detail as you can. Now your analysis here is feeding back to your AO3, which is the methods. So remember that this is a play. So you want to be commenting on dramatic devices. You also want to be commenting on language. Can you spot anything in terms of, are there any semantic fields? Is there any imagery that you can comment on? Any words that stand out that you can discuss the connotations of? So there's an awful lot here that you can pick out in terms of the methods that are used. And try and just make notes along the extract as you go. So what should you be looking for? So as you then go back and you're starting to highlight, you should be looking for, it's your how. So like I said, this now is your AO3. These are your methods. So how is their relationship presented? And these are just some ideas that I've put together as I've been teaching the different play units. So how is the extract organised? How do things progress, change or develop? How does the setting add to the mood, if that's relevant? Which dramatic devices have been used? So think about your stage directions, think about hesitations, characters cutting each other off, how much one character speaks in comparison to another, entrances and exits. If you can see any conflict, tension, any changes or developments, contrasts, themes, tone, what particularly stands out and is significant to you, what words stand out, so we're thinking about the language, if they do, why? What do these words suggest? What kind of sentences have been used? Have we got imperatives or declaratives? Are these simple sentences? What kind of imagery has been used? Is there any symbolism? Can we spot any patterns? Can we say anything about the clauses within a sentence? What's suggested to us about characters, actions, relationships? What's Miller trying to show us, and how is the audience supposed to react? So all of these questions could guide you when you're making your notes on the different things that you have highlighted. So let's have a look at what I've highlighted. So as you can see, there are lots of different colours here. So yellow are just my general highlights, and then the different colours are where I've spotted a pattern. So I'll just talk you through a few of my decisions as I'm going through. So because I had some notes already, and I look back at my notes, actually it's a good idea to have them next to you as you go through the extract. As I look back through my notes, I can see that I have desire on there, and I can see that I have secrecy, regret, I have power. So those words are really guiding me when I start to make my highlights. And this idea of desire, a knowing smile, this instantly stood out to me. So Proctor's knowing smile. Now he does change throughout this extract, so I thought it would be interesting to highlight how he initially has this quite playful, flirtatious relationship with Abigail, which actually changes very much towards the end. He's very insistent that their relationship is over, but here he's much more playful. So we have this idea of a knowing smile. And then I also pointed out down here that we go back to this idea of his smile. And his smile is widening. So I thought maybe later on I'll be able to link those two together and show that not only does he have a knowing smile, knowing suggests something about the desire that they've both shared, it suggests something about their relationship and maybe the sin that they've committed, but then also his smile widens in response to her. Again, shows us something about their relationship. And you'll notice that I have some green here, so everything that's green here is linked together. So Abigail has quite a nervous laugh, quite flirtatious, and then again her laugh develops just like his smile develops. We have a trill. What an interesting word. So this idea of trill would be something that I could analyze. So as you're picking these, you're always thinking to yourself, could I use this in an essay? Is there something in there I can analyze? Is there an interesting word? Is there a technique? And if there's nothing that you can say, then you probably wouldn't choose it later on when you make your final decisions. So we've got this trill of expectant laughter escaping her, almost like she can't control it. So we've gone from her laugh being quite nervous to trilling. It's expectant. What is she expecting? Is this something to do with the desire that they share? And it escapes her. Could this be metaphorical? Is this also her desire escaping her? So as you can see, I'm thinking about what these show as we go. And if this was a piece of paper, I would just be making these notes as we go through. So all of these bits in yellow, these are just things that I thought stood out, and I'll just actually talk to you about the patterns. So then we have this idea of knowing. So all the pink here, I thought, oh, we've got repetition here. But actually what's interesting is not only is this repetition, but it's repetition between the characters, which suggests a relationship. So she says, I know you better. He repeats, you know me better. There's an acknowledgement of some kind of relationship there, some kind of mutual understanding, a past, something that they've shared. And then towards the end here, she says, I know you, John. So it's slightly developed this idea of knowing, and we can link it back to this idea of she's softening now. Is she trying to manipulate him more now by repeating this idea, by going back to this commonality that they share, this idea of knowing each other? And then I also noticed that we've got Proctor says a wild thing to say, and Abigail makes reference to herself as well as what she's saying. A wild thing may say wild things, and this is in relation to what she's talking about in terms of their sexual relationship up here, and it's a wild thing for many reasons. It's a sin, it's adultery, and also this idea of individual pleasures, individual desires really goes against the Puritan doctrine. So there's multiple things you can say about that. What I've also highlighted here is this dash here to show that she's cut him off. So what I would try and do here, if I was going to choose it, is I would do something that I call doubling up. So what I try and tell my own pupils is, try and say two things about a quotation if you can. So here I would comment on the language. I would also comment on the fact that she cuts him off. So we have a dramatic device as well. She cuts him off and she repeats what he said, but she takes it further by referring to herself as a wild thing. Shows her confidence, shows her power. And then I'll just talk you through this last pattern that we have. And we have this field here, so we have heat, burning, and then wintry. So we have all of these words that you could link to passion and desire. So she says to him, I have a sense for heat. And then she says, I've seen you burning up in your loneliness. So she's making reference to his desire for her. She's incredibly confident. And again, this goes against not only the Puritan religion, but it also goes against what's expected in terms of her gender. She's definitely taking control here. And she's talking about things that she shouldn't really be talking about. And then she makes a reference to him by saying he's not a wintry man, again making reference to his desire and the relationship that they've shared. So as you can see, there's an awful lot here that I've highlighted, and I've tried to give myself a key here. So you may, if you have multiple different coloured highlighters, decide which is your general. So I've got a lot of yellow. These are things that I like, that have stood out for me. But then what I've also got is patterns that I've noticed, because that might help you when you're trying to pick up multiple quotations for your points. And as you go, just make your notes as well. So now you've highlighted, you're ready to make a plan. Your plan is where you pull together all of your ideas, all of your notes, all of your highlights, and you think, okay, now I'm going to hit AO4. This is where I pull everything into a coherent essay. So you want to make sure that you go back to the question. You're addressing the question directly now, and you're trying to decide, which points do I want to make? Which big ideas are being reflected in this extract, and which evidence will I use to support it? So which examples help you to answer the question? Which examples are interesting enough for you to comment on? Now, I made references already. So try and really look at your examples and decide, can I use it? Can I comment on it? If you can't, you will have to be ruthless and say, I'm not going to use that one, I'm going to pick another one. So which examples are now of no use? So I've highlighted an awful lot. I will not be able to use all of that. But once I've decided what my points for my plan are, then I can go back through and make my final choices. Think about your ideas in response to the question. Then you select your evidence. And then you can think about how your idea is shown within the evidence. So notice, as I was talking you through my selections, I was also telling you, well, this is why I've chosen it. This is how it links back to some of the keywords that I wrote down at the beginning. And I was also picking out dramatic devices, language choices. And you're also trying to think about what Miller is trying to show you. What's he trying to show you about the relationship? What's he trying to show you about the society? What's he trying to show you about desire and sin and repression? So we go back to the notes that we had from the beginning, and I've just highlighted in green all of the things that I think actually are relevant now I've gone through and highlighted. So Abigail's power, Abigail's feelings and her vulnerability, John's feelings in contrast to hers. So you see his guilt and you see his awareness of his sin and his regret to do with that, and then we see how his attitude changes. We see that their relationship is quite complicated because it starts off, like I said, flirtatious, but then towards the end there's more anger there. And that links into the tension, so I think that's also quite relevant. In terms of when I'm answering and when I'm trying to talk about my evidence, some of these will actually help me. So her being in an inferior position, does she conform to that? Actually, she doesn't. What's the effect of them living in such a repressed society? And how is this now becoming more interesting and more poignant? The individuals and individual desire. And then I've got again down here, so I like this idea of tension, so the tension between them. And I actually think that shows us a power struggle. So all these greens, they're now the things that I think, yes, I've seen that in the extract. The evidence that I've selected definitely shows that. So I think I will use those to help me formulate my points. So all of these notes will help you with pretty much every single aspect of your paragraph that builds the body of your essay. So now we're ready to start our plan. So what you want is you want to pull all of that information together, think about the big ideas, and think about your immediate response to the question. So how does Miller portray the relationship? So kind of flip the question on its head and rephrase it. Miller portrays the relationship as, through, by. So if you're struggling, just try and finish that sentence. And if you'll notice here, what I've done is I've just taken all of the words, phrases, ideas that I already had made at the beginning of this lesson. So we have point 1, Miller effectively presents a desire between Proctor and Abigail. Miller creates a sense of a power struggle between Abigail and John, and Miller introduces the idea that relationship is complicated. Once you've got your points and you're happy with them, then you will go back and decide on your quotations. So you want to aim for between 2 and 3 quotations per point. So if you can't find 3, don't worry. 2 will be enough because you just want to show that you've managed to find multiple quotations for each point. It may be that you decide to have 3 quotations here and then 2 and then 2, or you may decide to have 2, 2, 2. It's completely up to you, and it depends how much time you have. Now the easiest thing for you to do is number the quotations on your extract. So this is point 1. So you would go through and then you would decide, okay, now what shall I keep in terms of my quotations? Which ones can I use in terms of this particular point, and how does it reinforce my point? So you may go through and you may think, okay, that one doesn't work, this one does work, and then you ask yourself your questions. Can I comment on it? How does it reinforce my point? And if you're struggling to answer those questions, keep going and pick another one. Now, in terms of the notes, this is where you add in your analysis, your comment on the themes, could be the effect on the audience, or Miller's intention. That encompasses all the notes that you should be making. Now, as I said, I would have been making them as I was highlighting. You may have been doing that as well. But if you haven't, now is the time to just make little notes on your extract once you've decided which quotations are your final quotations. So if you choose to leave your annotation to this point, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter which way that you do it. And it is at this point that I just remind you, do check out Miss Duckworth's micro lessons. These very short lessons do just help you with the skills of writing a literature essay. They help you to formulate an effective point and also to ensure your quotations are relevant to that point. So let's just have a look at point 1 and what I would be doing here. So point 1, just to remind you, Miller effectively presents a desire between Proctor and Abigail. So now what I'm doing is I'm going back through everything that I've already selected, and I'm thinking which ones effectively show the desire between Proctor and Abigail. And so what I've done is, because this is point 1, I've just numbered them. So all of the ones are the ones that I would use for point 1. So I've got here this idea of a knowing smile and the smile widening. I like the idea that we have a pattern here, but I also like the idea that it shows his initial response to her. Maybe it's a more honest response to her before he's able to catch himself and control himself. I also like the idea that we have this stage direction feverishly looking into his eyes. And then we also have this simile over here, sweated like a stallion. So we have simile, it's sibilance. I think it really portrays this kind of sexual relationship between them, but it also shows something quite interesting in terms of Abigail and her confidence and her ability to talk about this in front of him, and maybe the reasons why she's willing to pull back on this and to bring this back to their conversation. So as you can see, I've got 4 here, and I did suggest to you 2 to 3. Some of them are quite short, but also if you notice, this one links together. So actually I'm going to count this as one piece of evidence. Obviously I'll present them as 2, but I'll talk about them together. The fact that we have this idea of his smile changing and his smile growing and revealing something about how he feels. So we have one set of quotations here, then I'll move on to feverishly looking into his eyes, and then I'll move on to sweated like a stallion. So these would be my 3 pieces of evidence for point 1. And then all you would do is you would do the exact same thing for point 2 and point 3. So now you have what you want to say about how Miller presents their relationship. You have the evidence for point 1. Obviously you would carry that on and do the same for point 2 and point 3. We've gone through and thought about the dramatic devices that we can comment on. We've got some notes on analysis in terms of dramatic devices, but also language as well, so the imagery or the word choice. And we have a clear plan. Now you can use this up to write your answer in detail. And also don't forget all the stages that we've been through today. Use the DREAM acronym, that will definitely help you. So deconstruct the question, read, understand, and highlight. Analyze your choices, eliminate irrelevant or weak choices. This is where you make your final decisions. Can I use this? Can I comment on it? Does it show something in relation to my point? And finally, you make your plan. So thank you very much for taking part in this lesson. Do look out for the next one, which is how to write up your answer. Thank you very much. Goodbye.